Okay, we are rolling.
We are rolling, brother.
Champions of Champions boxing talk here. Well, welcome back to the voice of reason, to the voice of champions, to the voice of... Well, let's just cut to the chase. Welcome back. Today's video is going to be how Errol Spence, what he must do to defeat the legend Manny Pacquiao. Now, I've had some people saying, you're looking at this fight from Manny's angle and you're kind of ignoring or underestimating Errol Spence. No, that is not the truth. And, excuse the pun, the truth. I am not underestimating Errol Spence at all. I know he is a dangerous fighter and he has a chance. Let's be real about it. He has a big chance. He's world-class, elite welterweight. So let's not get things twisted. Go back and look at any of my videos. Aside from this fight, I don't think I've ever picked against Errol Spence. I thought it'd be a tough fight with Porter, but I thought he would win. Go check out that video. Mikey Garcia, I thought Errol Spence would stop Mikey Garcia, I think, at some point. I picked Errol Spence heavily against Kell Brook. So, for people to be saying, you're against Errol Spence, no, I just believe styles make fights. But however, some fighters are special and they can overcome styles. Errol may be one of them. We shall see come fight night. So, we're going to make some notes here. I did these types of videos a couple of years back with Keith Thurman and Manny Pacquiao and what they have to do. And some of the things I mentioned, Keith Thurman fell short in. And I'm going to explain what Errol Spence needs to do. It's important, right? Some things may seem small, but trust me, they really add up in a fight of this magnitude and when you're getting two top-level athletes fighting each other. It's a game of inches. You have to remember at the top level, we sometimes see a fight and it looks dominating. But it's a split second a punch lands here, a split second a punch lands there. Two punches win a round, one jab wins a round. You're talking close in terms of talent level here. I don't care how you scored the fight v Manny Pacquiao, Floyd Mayweather. Some people had it really heavily to Floyd, right? But in most of them rounds, you're talking about Floyd landing a jab here or a right hand there. One or two punches may have nicked him the round. That is not domination. There is not much difference in terms of skill set between great fighters. Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather are close in talent level in their own ways. Never mind who's winning the rounds. Look how the rounds are won. The most dominant rounds in that fight were from Manny Pacquiao. Right? 4 and 6. But you judge fights round for round. Even look at Canelo Alvarez v Floyd Mayweather. And on the scorecards, it's dominant. But, the round is sort of going here, there, everywhere. And then Floyd takes it up and lands a couple of straight right hands, an uppercut here, and takes the round. But on the surface, and boxers understand this, on the surface it looks dominant. But actually that's kind of close. I know Floyd's took the round. But when 3 punches separate a fighter in 3 minutes... that just shows, we're talking, the margins are small. But anyway, these are the margins. These are the margins. That should be the word for this fight, the margins, and what Errol Spence has to do. So let's get on to it. He has to fight the fight, not the occasion. Now people say, oh, well, he's been in big fights in, the big Texas arena with Mikey Garcia, with Sean Porter, with Kell Brook in Sheffield. This is not like fighting Manny Pacquiao. Them occasions don't compare with fighting Manny Pacquiao. Keith Thurman found this out. Manny Pacquiao is one half. He is one half of the biggest commercial fight in history. Think about that. Manny Pacquiao is the second biggest pay-per-view star in the history of the sport after Floyd Mayweather. Manny Pacquiao is the biggest pay-per-view boxer who is not an American. Globally. He is... Take Floyd Mayweather out the equation, right? Manny Pacquiao has sold more pay-per-views than Mike Tyson and Oscar De La Hoya. That is scary, because Mike Tyson, we all know how big he was. For Manny Pacquiao, a flyweight who eventually ended up a dominant welterweight, to have outsold one of the most entertaining heavyweights of all time is staggering. But it brings pressure, and not to Manny, and not to Floyd. It brings pressure to their opponent if they don't handle it well, right? So the microscope will be under Errol Spence. The press conferences will be huge. The face-off will be huge. He will have Beatlemania in the audience. In the weigh-in, it will look like a Beatles concert in the 1960s. The crowd will be there cheering Manny, Manny, Manny. There will be thousands, hundreds of thousands watching in the United States, maybe millions on pay-per-view, and millions worldwide. The arena will be full. The atmosphere will be electric. Right? I've never faced a guy like Manny Pacquiao or Floyd Mayweather. But I have ran marathons when thousands of people are on the streets and thousands of runners are there, and it's a big occasion for me. And I can tell you something. The energy you lose on the first mile because of adrenaline, and sometimes if you let the occasion come, and affect you, is immense. It is not like going out for a jog around the street. It should be. If you can handle the occasion well, ironically, the race can be easier than the training. But if you don't handle the fanfare, the occasion, the event well, it can zap your energy, and you can begin to do things, change things that you were doing in training. You begin to doubt your training. You begin to doubt your preparation. And you start doing things other runners do. Sometimes boxers can do the same. The occasion's electric. Manny Pacquiao enters the ring, and it's fast pace. And fast pace suits Manny Pacquiao early, still, right? He ends up throwing fast punches. The crowd is up off their feet. You think you've got to do something different. You exchange with Manny Pacquiao early, and what does he do? What he did to Keith Thurman. He drops him. Keith Thurman goes back in a straight line, and down he goes. And then after that, the crowd energized. You see, Manny Pacquiao knows how to deal with the energy that the crowd gives him. Manny Pacquiao then is on the front foot. The crowd is behind him. The occasion is becoming his. You've got to wait for that motor to slow down if it does, which it did a bit in the Keith Thurman fight. But by the time it slowed down, Manny Pacquiao had effectively won the fight on the scorecards. Right? But the occasion, it must be managed. Because Manny Pacquiao treats a big fight like a party. It's a party atmosphere. He loves being around the fans and the media and all of this stuff as much as he loves the fights. Same with Floyd Mayweather. He's having fun making 24/7 and what was the other show called? These reality shows he made building up to a big fight. Floyd was acting like an actor on set having fun, while the other guy is probably worrying about how he lands a shot. Right? Floyd loves the attention in a different way to Manny, but all big name all great fighters, a lot of them had this in common. Muhammad Ali, the press conferences were electric. His mouth was as fast as his hands. Right? Lomachenko, you could see, he loves fight week. Right? Pound for pound fighters love it. Even Inoue, look at Inoue. He looks like he's going to see his family on another continent when he arrives for fight night. Loves the occasion. Gennady Golovkin, Canelo Alvarez. Let's face it, the occasion at times has pushed Canelo Alvarez over the edge in a few of his fights. He loves it. Football teams are the same. You play at Barcelona, the Nou Camp, or Real Madrid. Sometimes when them teams have got average teams, the crowd becomes the 12th man on the pitch. Right? So when they say, Brandon Rios said fighting Manny Pacquiao, it's like fighting an octopus. There are 8 hands in there hitting you. Well, there might be a 9th, and that's the crowd. Right? Floyd Mayweather said the crowd can't fight for you, but trust me, it can inspire you. Ricky Hatton was another one. Ricky Hatton said, although he won't go down in his view as the greatest British fighter of all time, he believes he had the greatest fans. And some of that pushed him over the edge in some of his big fights, like Kostya Tszyu. They give Hatton a vibe that you just can't replicate in an empty arena. You just can't. So that is what Errol Spence needs to remember. He's got his fans, but let's face it, he's the supporting act where the crowds are concerned, v Manny Pacquiao. And he has to let his mind settle on that and fight the fight and not the occasion. So, the next point. What he trains for, he has to do. And he doesn't want to be doing things too different. I'm hearing things like, oh, Floyd Mayweather's going to give him a ring and a text message and some advice. Yes, you can refine certain things in a training camp, but he doesn't want to become someone else in the ring come fight night, because Mike Tyson said it best. They're all great with a plan until they get hit. If Errol Spence is bouncing around the ring a la Floyd Mayweather and trying to look for that perfect right hand like Marquez, he may forget his own talents in there. And before he knows it, he gets hit and he gets ragged. Right? Errol Spence has to be the best ever version of what Errol Spence is. And we all know his attributes. His body work, right? His work rate. His willingness to never give in. Because let's face it, in the Porter fight, lesser fighters might have crumbled there. But it wasn't going Errol's way. But he dug down and got a result out of it. He did the same with Kell Brook, right? He has to bring that spirit in the ring. Okay? That's what he has to do. So he has to be who he always was, but make sure it is the best version of what he always was, if that makes sense. Which brings me on to body work. He has to use the jab, use hooks to the body to slow Manny Pacquiao's feet down, right? Has to. It is key in this fight, because Errol Spence will realise, particularly early, if Manny is still, in good elite level standards come fight night. If Father Time is not too harsh on Manny Pacquiao, Errol Spence will realise keeping up with these feet is not as easy as people think. Keith Thurman again found that out. And Errol Spence's feet are not as quick as Keith Thurman's. Let's be honest there. So how do you counter a guy who moves so well? You've got to find a way to get to the body. Now, Manny Pacquiao doesn't take much hooks to the side of his ribs. What Errol may have to do, and he'll have to make sure his guard is up quickly before he does that, or I should say after he applies this, is shoot the jab to the body. Now, people say, well, that's a very insignificant punch. Try taking a jab to the body by an elite athlete. Now, it may be very little early on, but as time goes on, that takes effect. It takes the wind, it takes the air out of the wheels. It may slow Manny Pacquiao's legs down if he's constantly popping the body with the jab, if he gets the chance, right? He has to somehow take Manny's feet away, because it's not just Manny's movement, right? which is great with his feet. There's another thing in combination with his feet, and again, Floyd Mayweather talked about it. His power comes from his feet. His power comes from his feet. When he's moving and he hits you, them calves are incredibly strong, right? If you can somehow take Manny's feet, you might not only take away the movement, you might take away some of the power. That is a big help, let me tell you. Even so, we know in a shootout, Manny Pacquiao's hands are really fast. But again, if the feet are kind of gone, the power, it's more difficult to generate then. So that is point number 2. Another one, and I think this is interesting. You have to accept your fate as an opponent of Manny Pacquiao. You have to accept your fate, right? What do I mean by that? Whether you win or lose to Manny Pacquiao, chances are you are going to take a terrible beating in that ring. Even guys that have beaten Manny Pacquiao in recent times have looked terrible. The only guy that didn't leave the ring looking like he'd been hit by a bus was Floyd Mayweather. Name me another fighter that hasn't looked marked up after facing Manny Pacquiao. The ironic thing is, some of the guys that have beaten him have looked worse after fighting him than some of the guys he's beaten. Right? Jesse Vargas, to me, looked a bit better than Jeff Horn, even though they give Jeff Horn the decision. I disagreed with that decision. But Eric Morales beat Manny Pacquiao the first time. He looked a wreck. He looked an absolute train wreck, right? Some fighters, I think, go in that ring, it's a bit like the Mike Tyson atmosphere, and they think, oh, this is going to be difficult. Trust me, when you prepare for pain, when the pain comes, right, when you accept it, I'm not saying worry about it. Don't worry about it. But know it could come, right? When you accept pain, but know you're going to get through it, you know on mile 25 it's going to hurt in a marathon, but you know you're more than capable of finishing the race. You've prepared yourself. When you get in a cold shower, I'm not comparing it with being hit by Manny Pacquiao, but when you get in a cold shower, you know the first 15 to 20 seconds are going to be difficult. But when you do it time over time, you prepare yourself. And in the end, it gives you enthusiasm, gives you encouragement. You know you can deal with this. But Errol Spence must realise that at times he's going to find this at least as difficult as the Sean Porter fight physically, maybe more, right? If he is at peace with that, that will help. I'm not saying he should have sleepless nights thinking about what could happen. It's quite the opposite. Fighters go in there thinking, I'm not going to be the guy that takes the punishment from Manny Pacquiao. I know his rhythm, I know his movement, and then they find out it's different once they get in there. Even if they beat him, as I say, they come out a different person most of the time. Sometimes fighters are never the same again. Jeff Horn was destroyed by Terence Crawford after fighting Manny Pacquiao. Right? Did that fight in Australia with Manny Pacquiao take the edge and soften Jeff Horn up for Terence Crawford? Because Jeff Horn has not been the same since fighting Manny Pacquiao. That 9th round, I don't know what kept Jeff Horn up. Antonio Margarito was never the same after facing Manny Pacquiao. Right? And this is a guy that is known to be able to take punishment extremely well, and it was still too much for him. But Errol Spence, I think that happened to those guys because psychologically, Margarito thought that he had that one. He had no idea what was coming. But if you can prepare yourself mentally, as well as physically, but the mental part is 80% of this, guys. If you can do that, right, then you're in good stead. Or better stead, shall we say. Point number 2. Well, wherever we are in this video, but this is an important one. You have to make the older fighter work. You can't, as good a boxer as Errol Spence is, The veterans are great when you give them time. That's why Ricky Hatton was on Costa Zoo, right? If you give Costa Zoo time to pick his moment, he'll pick it. If you give Manny Pacquiao time to pick his moment, he'll pick it, right? I'm not saying Logan Paul is Muhammad Ali II, but the reason that guy got through the fight with Floyd Mayweather, he did not give Floyd that much time to pick his moment. He was grappling, he was holding, he was wrestling. Had he stood there and admired the legend, the veteran, he'd have got picked apart even more than he did. But he made it to the final bell because he didn't let the old man use the old tricks, right? Here's the thing. We never know, and I mentioned it the other day, and Manny Pacquiao used to love guys like Errol Spence that would just come and fight. But the sign of an aging fighter is when they were great at dealing with pressure fighters, but now they're struggling with them. When are we going to see the time that happens with Manny Pacquiao? Errol's got to test that out. He's got to keep Manny working. He's got to keep working. And he's good at that, Errol Spence. He's good at that. But again, we'll go back to the occasion again. Don't use too much energy, feeling apprehensive about the crowd and what could happen and this, that, and the other. Be Errol Spence. Be Errol Spence, right? And work. Work. That's what you're good at. And you're young enough to do it, right? That's what he's got to do. And maybe, because Keith Thurman, his best moments in that fight were later on. So bear that in mind. Keith Thurman's best moments didn't come early. They came later in the fight v Manny Pacquiao. That's got to give Errol Spence some hope in this fight, right? And it gives him a big chance. So don't let the old guy, the old legend, pick his wisdom, because he will pick his wisdom. And he's still got faster hands than Errol Spence. If you stand there in the ring, waiting, playing chess, Manny Pacquiao will pick you apart. I don't care how good of a boxer Errol Spence is. Manny's seen it all. Do we really think that technically Errol Spence, as good as he is better technically than Floyd Mayweather? No. It's got to be a mix. If Errol is winning the technical battles, stick to that. But if he finds he's being picked with left hands and right hooks, and Manny Pacquiao is there's a saying in boxing, isn't there? You got old manned out of the fight. In other words, experience just beat you. Because as a young guy, you didn't apply yourself. He has to apply himself as the young guy in this fight. And not be too back foot focused. What do I mean by that? Errol Spence, if he is on the run from Manny Pacquiao, and what I mean by that is if he is on the back foot boxing, will give the crowd and potentially even judges, right, something to think about. Errol Spence is even bigger than Floyd Mayweather, and I remember talking to people who don't know much about, the sweet science, shall we say, and they kind of liked Floyd Mayweather before the bell rang. After the fight, I remember this girl saying to me, I prefer the Filipino guy, and I said, why? She said she can't stand to see a bigger guy running from a smaller one. If Errol Spence is running around the ring and Manny is chasing him down, Errol Spence is not the commercial force that Floyd Mayweather is. He may not get the round. Trust me, you can be. It's happened to Manny Pacquiao where he's been robbed because of pressure, right? The judges at the ringside, there's been some interference going on that has got to them, and they've robbed Manny Pacquiao of the decision. Errol Spence, right? If people are screaming Manny, Manny, Manny as he's hunting Errol Spence down, as a judge, you're thinking, this is unbelievable. This is the best current welterweight in the world right now, and this 42-year-old is walking him down. That's his round. Do you see where I'm going with this? So it is important. Some of these things are big, some of these things are small, but they all make up an equation. So Errol Spence, he also needs, and this is another key factor, when he lands, he has to get Manny Pacquiao's respect. I know people are saying Manny has to get Errol's respect, but it goes both ways. And the early part of the Keith Thurman fight with Manny Pacquiao was taking, and really throughout the fight, but particularly early, he was taking Keith Thurman's power very well. A bit similar to the way he was taking Miguel Cotto's power. And I argue that Miguel Cotto and Keith Thurman may arguably hit harder than Errol Spence. If Manny Pacquiao thinks to himself, wow, this power, it's overrated, he will attempt to go in there and do some damage. You want to discourage the damage, because if Errol Spence finds himself in a position where he's not took the damage that could be anticipated, his confidence grows. So if he lands a left hand, a power shot at that, and Manny Pacquiao then is reluctant to be the hunter, Errol Spence can apply his predatory skill then and be confident that I can bother this guy. My power bothers this guy. I've got the legend's respect. Right? His defense has to be on point. And his head movement has to be there. I've seen a lot of Errol Spence's head at times and it looks stationary. But he has to prepare, and this is the final point. He has to prepare for the best Manny Pacquiao. He has to look at old films of Manny Pacquiao v. Ricky Hatton and Miguel Cotto. That's who he has to prepare for. He can't sit around and think that he's just fighting a 42-year-old. He'll lose that way. Keith Thurman did, right? But if he prepares for the best, Lennox Lewis said it, he prepared for the best Mike Tyson. Even though Mike Tyson may have seen better days by the time he fought Lewis, Lewis ignored it and prepared for the best. And look at the result, right? Errol Spence has to do the same. He has to imagine that Manny Pacquiao is going to come in that ring for one last hurrah, maybe, the best version, that he will rewind the clock. That will make Errol Spence tick every box in preparation, because he'll have to. And it's funny, life. Shoulds, you've got to turn your shoulds into musts. When something is a should, you might do it, but you might fail. But when it is a must, you succeed more times than not, right? So I've given you again, and again, another mouthful. But I just think some of these points are important. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is how Manny Pacquiao defeats Errol Spence. But again, you guys have been patient, you guys have been legends, and we've got a legendary fight, haven't we, in August. And this is Champions of Champions Boxing Talk. I'm out, brother and sister.